Welcome to Liner Notes. My name is David Bixler. Drummer and composer Allison Miller begins 2025 with several diverse and exciting projects. Big and Lovely, a recording of her original music with the University of North Texas 1 O'Clock Lab Band, was released on January 10. On February 2nd at 3 p.m. at the 92nd Street Y in New York City, Allison will present Rivers in Our Veins, an ambitious multimedia work featuring the award-winning dancer Michelle Dorrance as a special guest and features 3 additional dancers, plus live video projections by Todd Winkler, in an ensemble that features violinist Jenny Scheinman, pianist Carmen Staaf, trumpeter Jason Palmer, clarinetist Ben Goldberg, and bassist Rashaan Carter. Lastly, Artemis, Downbeat magazine's Group of the Year, makes its debut at the Village Vanguard the week of March 4th. Allison Miller, welcome to Liner Notes. Good morning. Thank you for meeting with us today. You have a bunch on your plate right now that I want to touch on, and I think first one is the new record, Big and Lovely. With North Texas State 1 O'Clock Lab Band. Anxious to hear about all that you're doing. Looks like you're all over the place right now, both musically and geographically.
Definitely. Yeah, it's good to see you.
Starting with this band, excellent record. The band sounds great. Some patient, mature solos from some young people, really, really cool. And it's all your music, a different arranger for every tune. Let's start about how this project came about.
Yeah, well, I would say it was birthed when I was 12. Because really my first experience playing professionally was in a big band. When I was 12, my teacher, Walter Salb, decided to bring me on board to be part of his kind of every Tuesday night rehearsal band. And one of the great things about that band was that, first of all, there were no drum charts. And second of all, he had 2 arrangers in the band who were doing handwritten charts for everything. And everything from, more at the time, this was the 80s, so more modern Wayne Shorter compositions to, the swing era classics. And that's really where, I cut my teeth as a really young musician, just learning how to play big band, having him yell at me he was already yelling at me all the time, but, he became the director, the conductor of the band, and I just took over the drum chair, from pretty much from age 12. And it was amazing because I was not only completely out to lunch and not understanding anything, but I was also getting a chance to play with folks from all of the top military bands. This was all the guys from the Army, the Airmen of Note and the Army Blues and all of these different, really, the Navy Commodores, they were coming and playing in his band on Tuesday nights. And it was great. So that's where it started. And I loved playing big band so much. But then, as you know, as you become a professional, there aren't as many big band opportunities out there. And I really kind of veered away from it for many years, but I always wanted to make a big band record, really from that age. So yeah, I guess in the last couple of years, I had a couple friends just offer to make arrangements of my originals, and that planted the seed even further. Jeff Lederer made this arrangement of Big and Lovely, and couple of my friends, Pat Donahar, who's a band director up near Boston, he made an arrangement of something, and my friend Dan out in California, it's kind of building up over the years. And then I realized, I think that this music works for big band. I can't arrange for big band because I'd never done that, and I wish I could, but I haven't taken the time to really dive into it. So yeah, it just kind of was in the back of my mind of this, bucket list record I wanted to make. And then fast forward to 2022, the director of the 1 o'clock, Alan Baylock, called and invited me as the guest artist for that year. So I had this opportunity to play with a collegiate big band that I thought could really possibly nail some of these arrangements. So I had a couple more arrangements made specifically for the 1 o'clock, with various friends of mine who I adore their arranging skills. And we went in 2022, did this guest artist position, and it just gelled. And Alan and I really hit it off. He feels like a brother from another mother kind of feeling. And we immediately just became really tight and really good friends. And after that experience, I said, hey, this went really well. Would you guys be up for making a record? And he said, yeah. And that was kind of the final catalyst that I needed to do it. And we did it. We recorded in March of 23 down there. And I brought in, the other bucket list thing for me was to work with this one engineer. Her name is Leslie Ann Jones, and she is old school engineer. She's the head engineer at Skywalker Studios in California, which is George Lucas's studio. She is legendary in that recording business and has, multi Grammy winning recordings. She used to do all of Rosemary Clooney's big band records, and she's just a badass. And so my second bucket list was to have her engineer my big band record. So she and I are friends, and she agreed to do it, and she flew out, and we made this record in Denton, Texas, which is amazing.
That's great. Oh, I want to just jump back to your experience as a 12-year-old. You're 12 years old with all these adults. I mean, is that intimidating, or are you just like so down to do this, you don't care?
I was afraid of my teacher. So I think that's where I have to start. I was afraid of him, and I basically did whatever he said to do, and because I didn't want him to yell at me, which is not very healthy. But you and I are close enough in age that we've
Tough
had
jazz love.
exactly. We had the tough jazz love, which I think is something that's kind of missing today in education. Yeah, so I just did what he said, and he said, come over and get your ass over here. Come over here Tuesday night, and it just became normal for me. I mean, all of my jazz friends, because I started gigging at such a young age, because I started also doing just regular like wedding gigs, and that band gigged, and I had right around the time I got my license, I started working every Saturday night at Andrews Air Force Base. I was playing in the big band that played just head charts, or not head charts, but the guy would be like, okay, number 10, number 12, and we'd be playing Sing 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 and all of the dance tunes for all the officers and their wives at Andrews Air Force Base. So for me, I was always surrounded by older guy jazz musicians, and they didn't, all those guys I remember on Tuesday nights, I kind of loved it because they just acted like themselves. They didn't treat me like a kid. They were like, okay, you're in, let's go, and they're hanging out, smoking cigars, and he would always get a couple cases of Milwaukee's Best, and they'd just be drinking beer and smoking cigars, and who knows what else. That's all I knew.
That's an oxymoron. Milwaukee's Best. Haven't grown up there. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, I loved it, and the other thing I loved was I've always been that I was always that kid that loved a challenge, but was also extremely scared at the same time. But I had this kind of you have to push through mentality, which I don't know how healthy that is, but at the time it was working for me, and I just loved kind of getting my ass kicked musically, and going home and then figuring out what I did wrong while I practiced, and I loved learning how to interpret big band without reading drum charts. I only was given either scores or lead trumpet parts, and they were all handwritten. So that was, at the time, I didn't realize it because I didn't know any better. But in hindsight, I realized how valuable that was, because it really forced me to use my ears and to subconsciously start to understand harmony, like what harmony sounds like and what its function is. So if I'm looking at a second trumpet chart with all the solo changes, I'm associating what I'm hearing with each chord. So as a drummer, I feel like I had an advantage by doing that.
Right. Makes sense. Any thoughts about, as good as the band sounds, would this have been any different if you would have put together a band of people from New York?
Yeah, of course. Right. Yeah, I had to push, I think that initially my music was a little out of the box for these musicians, and certain sections at that time, it's the 1 o'clock, so it changes every semester. But at that time, the certain sections were young, and I think certain just mature approaches to modern jazz weren't quite grasped in the moment, right? And so yeah, there was an element of needing to educate a little bit or pontificate a little bit while we were recording. But the older I get, and I'm sure you probably feel this way too, is that for those students to have the opportunity to do this, and for me to have the opportunity to work with them, was really special. Intergenerational, putting aside certain expectations that I had and working with what we had to work with, and pushing everybody. And pushing myself too, Sometimes I had to, in certain tunes, certain arrangements, kind of let go of perfection and let it be what it was, And of course, we're in the modern day of recording, so there's editing afterwards, But no, of course there was a difference. We could have, if it was all pros, could have come in and probably nailed it in 2 days without even rehearsals, right? But this gave me an opportunity to really connect with the youth and give them an opportunity and go down there and spend time with these students and get to know them. It was a special thing. We hung out. The older I get, the more I realize that it's now my time to do what those guys and my teacher's band did for me. That's what we do in jazz, right? We reach out to the youth and we bring them up. And now I feel that way all across the board. Like whenever I have a show with my band, I'm trying to hire at least one student now, because it's important. It's important for them to not feel that. It's important for us to coexist together, right, in an educational setting, but also on the bandstand.
Right. And that's where I was going to go. It's as if you were kind of recreating what you experienced at age 12, with that big band experience. That's cool. One other question before we go on about the big band. Did you have any stipulations about how your tunes would be treated, or you just send a lead sheet and a recording of the small group thing and say, have at it?
I just said, have at it. Certain folks, I like Noriko Ueda, who's an incredible big band arranger, and she's my bandmate in Artemis. I said, hey, here's a list of tunes that I want to play in a big band setting. Want to pick one? And so she listened and she's like, oh, I want to arrange Fierce for sure. So, and then as I did that as well for Shami Royston, and she chose Blue Wild Indigo. Actually, a few of the people I just sent tracks and I said, which one do you want to do? And somehow miraculously, everybody picked a different tune. It worked perfectly. I really love this arrangement that Sarah Chaksad, she lives in Switzerland, great arranger. She chose this tune Dan Dan, which was originally recorded for me and Carmen Staaf. It was originally written just piano drums duo, and she chose that tune. And I thought, what the hell is she going to do with this for big band? And I love what she did. And I also love that 3 of the arrangers added voice to the arrangements, and I did not ask them to do that. I really just let people go, do their thing. And then, of course, they would send me their first version, I would give notes, and we'd go back and forth, you know?
I had a friend that heard you in the band at Gen and said it was a really enjoyable performance. It was really strong. Yeah. Yeah, cool. Well, second project sounds very interesting is Rivers in Our Veins. And when I got the press release, it said this was a forthcoming project, but then I went to your website and realized this has already been recorded. And let's jump into that. It's interesting. In the fall, I don't know if you're aware of Stefan Crump's What Water Wants. And he was on the podcast. And a similar thing, he had a grant and something that was, very important to him. And so maybe, talk about this. It's sponsored by 2 different foundations. You have 2 different sources, and it looks like a large multimedia project with dancers and a band that you put together, and then video projections. So unpack. Yeah.
It's so funny because during COVID, I was like, I'm going to start minimizing the amount of people I take on the road. And then I wrote this thing. Actually, I wrote this thing before COVID. So, yeah, it started in 2018. I received a grant through the Mid-Atlantic Arts and which is also funded by Doris Duke and Jazz Touring Network, and then also through a New York State, Lake Placid Center for the Arts, a New York specific grant. So those were the 3 sources. And the initial, I chose the subject. And of course, I'm a huge lover of nature and water. So I chose specifically 5 rivers on the East Coast: the Hudson, the James, Delaware, Potomac, and the Susquehanna River. And it started then. And it took me about I did like a year of first research and traveling to each of the rivers, doing historical research, interviewing scholars and river keepers, things of this sort. And then I wrote this suite of music. And the finished product for these grants was like a 7-show tour. And we somehow pulled this thing together. It was right before COVID. It was maybe a month. It was, I think, early February or late January 2020. And we did this, we all packed into a van, and we did this 7-day tour. And when I say packed into a van, I literally mean we brought tap floors too in the van and gear. And there were 9 of us on this tour. I don't know how I got these people to agree with me, because none of us, it's not like we're 20 years old, we did it. And it was amazing, and it was very raw at that point. But I felt really proud of this piece of music, and I really at first didn't have much of an intention to record it. Like, it was a live thing, because as I did my research, I realized that I wanted actual visual movement on stage. And a lot of the music is really derived it's kind of a melting pot of how I think about American music. There's jazz, but there's also a lot of like Americana feeling, blues, folk influence, some classical influence. So I also wanted the visual to feel very American, and obviously percussive since I'm a drummer. So, and I work with a lot of tap dancers. So I brought in tap, and it was, and then I thought I need more visual. And then I brought in a videographer, and the video imagery that you see when you see the live piece is his imagery, but also mine, because I've taken a lot of drone footage when I travel. So I kind of make a point, my girlfriend and I, we make a point of like going into nature and shooting a lot of, she's a photographer, so she does a lot of camera work, and I do the drone filming. So I kind of have my hands in all of it, and it just kept building. I mean, I think maybe where the confusion comes, this record came out in 2023, but we are about to perform it at the 92Y in New York next weekend. And this production it's just grown since that initial tour. It's now 4 dancers and video and my full band and lighting design. And it's almost like a combination between a jazz concert and a theater piece. But I love
It
it.
sounds exciting.
It's
Yeah.
it's my creative baby. It's very difficult to put on because it requires a certain budget, and also everybody's so busy, so it's hard to get everybody available. But it's really special, and you know, each musician is the set musician. I really can't have subs in the band. It's a very specific thing, and yeah, I mean, I think of everything I've ever done, which has been a lot, because it's funny. My friend yesterday sent me a picture of her like Allison Miller catalog on her shelf at home, and I was like, oh, I actually have made a lot of records. Like I hadn't thought about it. And I'm like, oh, I've made like 15 records. But I think for this one, especially the live version of it, because it's such a it's such a journey. It feels like kind of my real creative, my baby. It feels like the kind of, for me, the thing I'm most passionate about right now.
Is the dance improvised also?
It's a combination. So for this show coming up, we have Michelle Dorrance as a special guest, who's an incredible superstar, tap dancer, choreographer. A lot of it is improvised, but there are moments where the 3 dancers or the 2 dancers come together and have choreographed moments. It's a mix. I would say 70% improvised, 30% choreographed, because I really want to, I'm of the belief of that tap dancers are really part of the band, and they're musicians. And the tap dancers I work with are incredible master musicians. So I'm integrating them into the band in a way that doesn't feel like a dance piece, right? There's every once in a while they come out front and they really take the spotlight, but oftentimes they're just incorporated into the band. So I wrote this one piece that is called Shipyards. I'll just send you the whole record.
Oh, great. Thanks.
And it's this fun piece. It's supposed to sound, because a lot of the music is, where I'm trying to make the music sound like a river, or the surroundings of a river. And so there's this one piece where it's about the James River, and I kind of want to get into the shipyard industry on the James, and the unionizing that happened along the James to protect the workers there. And so I wrote this song called Shipyards, and it sounds like you're in a shipyard. And then Carmen, the pianist, plays this it's in 5, but it doesn't sound like it's in 5, and it's complicated. And then I have these random hits that I wrote, and I tell you, the tap dancers, they hit every hit with me, and it's very complicated, but this is one of the choreographed moments that's amazing because it sounds like we're just all three of us, because I'm hitting those hits as well, and it sounds like there's no organization to it. It's just like, how are they hitting at the same time? Because it doesn't feel like it's in any specific meter, And it's amazing. I was so blown away by these tap dancers. They're amazing.
I want to ask you about a quote I saw on your website. My life got so much richer once I reconnected my rhythm making with dance. And maybe just elaborate on that.
Yeah, I mean, this music is motion, right? And we are supposed to move. We are supposed to look out into the audience and see our audience members moving, moving their head, moving any part of their body. And I find that in today's modern jazz world, one of the things that I think is missing is this connection with dance. And when I started working, I've worked with so many dancers. I actually made a conscious decision to start doing it. And that's about, I don't know, at least 10 years ago, maybe more. It's true. I felt so much more satisfaction. There's nothing like actually watching a dancer move while you provide the rhythm from the drums. It's a really special connection, and it makes me play different. It makes me play more organic and in the moment. And yeah, it makes me do the job that my number one job that I'm supposed to do, which is make it feel good and make it groove, and that's to me the most important thing. That's what I'm always, how much I teach. I'm always like really on my students about that because I say like, well, yeah, that was visually looked cool what you just did on the drums, but it didn't move me. I don't, like it might have seemed fancy, but I couldn't dance to it, And I also, feel very strongly that even free music has a pulse, right? So even if you're playing, when I listen to Ornette, when I listen to his more be out of time um, generation of his decade of his writing, it still had a pocket, like my favorite free drummers, Ed Blackwell, I felt a pocket there, even when it was out of time. So I'm always, really hammering that into my students. I'm like, listen, first things first, let's make it feel good. So that's a very important part of this piece as well. Yeah.
Lastly, Artemis is at the Vanguard. All of a sudden, I saw that this group existed. Maybe talk about the genesis of this. Is this something that the musicians put together, or did Blue Note want to do this? Or, was it kind of like remember the group Out of the Blue when I was in college that they kind of assembled and packaged, the phenomenal players in music. So maybe tell about that experience and what a listener could expect at the Vanguard that week.
Yeah, this band first came together. I think the first show was 2016. My recollection of what happened, because I was not part of the band yet, it wasn't a band. It was a project that was it was a tour put together by a French promoter. And he had reached out to Rini Rosnes and said, hey, would you want to come over and do a couple concerts to celebrate, it's like International Women's Day, and put together an all-woman band? And she said, okay, sure. So she put together a band. I was not part of that initial, I think it was 2 concerts. I think it was Terry Lynn on drums. And they did the concerts. They went really well. And so then the next year, he asked if she would want to put together an entire tour. So it was actually like a full 4-week European tour in the summer. And I had never worked with Rini, actually. And of course, I've always been a huge fan of hers from the time I first moved to New York. And she called me. And at that time, my son had just been born, my second kid. And she asked me, can you come out and do this 6-week tour? Because we had at least a week of rehearsals and something else over there. And I was like, I cannot leave my family for that long, I cannot do that to my wife, my then wife, And she said, Rini's cool. Rini was like, okay, cool. Well, what about, could you do 3 weeks of it? and I'll have another drummer do the first week. And I said, that I can do, and I really appreciated her willingness to work around my schedule. She also has a kid, so she understands, So I came on board. I flew over. I'll never forget my first show with them was at North Sea, and no rehearsal, no sound check, no, just a line check basically. But that's how we do, right? And I remember going on stage, and I mean, I hardly even knew. I mean, of course, I knew Ingrid really well, and Anat, Noriko. I didn't at the time. Melissa Aldana was in the band, and Cecile McLaurin-Salbant. I didn't know Cecile at all then, and we went out, and there was just a special chemistry. It was just immediate, and I'll never forget. Like at one point, I turned around, and I saw Rini smiling and looking at like kind of past me, and I turned around, and Chick Corea was sticking his head out of the curtains, and I was like, I cannot believe I'm doing this, playing with this band for the first time, and Chick is in the audience,
Nice. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah.
But that tour was really special, and when we left that tour, we were like, okay, this has to be a thing.
That was a thing.
It
Yeah.
was a thing. Sure, it was a gimmick. This French promoter started it as a gimmick, but then the chemistry was really special, and it became a thing. And then since then, we've had some personnel changes, and now it's settled. It's a quintet, and it's a real band. I mean, that's what you can expect if you come to the Vanguard show. It's a real band of musicians who love playing with each other. We have a really special chemistry. We're all coming from really different places musically, but somehow it comes together and it's a sound. I feel like a friend of mine recently said to me, what's so cool about Artemis is that you're coexisting in the tradition, but also contemporary. Like you're not trying to break any barriers or anything. You're just playing good music, and you're writing music for each other. That's all is very different. Each of you write completely different, but because you have an aesthetic and a sound, it works, and it really does. It's super fun. We did an interview the other day because part of the reason we're playing the Vanguard is because our third record's coming out the week before. And we did an interview, all five of us. And I kind of came to the realization that in that band, oftentimes I feel like I'm playing my most authentic self, because I'm able to play super swinging in that band, and then we have free moments, and we have like all the stuff I love that sometimes people say, well, you can't do both. You can't play free and swing, and in that band we do it all, and it works, and I feel like my most authentic self in those contexts, even more so than when I'm completely band leading on my own, because sometimes with my own music and when I'm in charge of everything, you probably know this feeling, I have a hard time just focusing on my job as a drummer once I'm behind a kit, because I'm thinking about, well, wait, they're not interpreting my melody like I wrote, and then, oh, right, did I pay everyone? Did everybody get fed? You're thinking about all that crap.
And they'll let you know.
Yeah, it's like
if
Artemis.
those things didn't happen.
Exactly. And Artemis is so awesome because, yeah, like one of us takes on more responsibility. Reni's the musical director, so she takes on more responsibility. But overall, it's like a side gig, but not, because it's a band. So we're all kind of equally invested, but we don't have to take on all the responsibility because it's divided between the five of us, and we have a manager who does a lot. So I love that band. Yeah. I mean, you're going to hear five people that love each other and love the music we make hanging out. And we're never trying to dazzle anybody. We're just playing music.
Yeah. Is everyone writing?
Everyone writes for the band. So, and I find it kind of funny because for this new record, we had this idea of each of us to write a song about a sense, like smell or taste. And each of us chose a sense, and we were supposed to write kind of like think about a childhood memory of that sense and write a song about it, which I thought was brilliant. But then we were all super busy before we recorded, and we had a long tour before, and none of us were really prepared to with our compositions. I was still writing as I went into the rehearsal the day before the recording. And like we get in there and all of us completely ended up ignoring the prompt and we all wrote songs about nature. It was like even when we're not talking about it, we're on the same page about stuff. Like I came in with a song about this beautiful island that we visited in Maine called Little Cranberry, and Noriko wrote a song called Komarebe, which is this Japanese word for light flowing through the trees. So it's like we all just went back to what we know, which is nature.
Very cool. Allison, I thank you for your time. Great to see you, and a lot of exciting music coming out, and I'm sure to continue. So wish you all the best.
Thanks.
Liner Notes is grateful for the support of Van Doren Reeds and Mouthpieces. Be sure and check out the Van Doren Advisory Studio in New York City for all your sound sculpting needs. Liner Notes is grateful for the support of Arlen's Good Beer in Bowling Green, Ohio.
Engineered by Marco Mendoza. Visit his website at engineeredbymarco.com. The theme music is Hide Seek Find from the record Beatitude, out on Tiger Turn.
Produced by David Bixler. Be sure and subscribe to Liner Notes wherever you find your podcasts. If you like what you hear, I ask that you consider supporting Liner Notes financially. You can do this by going to the Liner Notes tab at davidbixler.com. Thank you for your consideration.